Many years ago, another town, I was preaching at my church, and in the sermon I talked a lot about denominations, different Christian denominations, and afterwards one of my members came up and as he was shaking my hand and leaving church said, "Pastor, do you know the difference between a Southern Baptist and a Methodist?" And I said, "No." And he said, "A Methodist will never pretend like he doesn't know you in the liquor store." Now, I would never tell a joke like that. I don't know why he did, but he did. And as we know, there are many different denominations in the United States, in our country. And each denomination has its own doctrines about who Jesus is and what Jesus is. And if we want to be a part of that group, we have to assent to or accept these teachings about Jesus. And this has caused a lot of people doubt. Because as children become adults or adults see the church, they realize that to be a part of the group, they have to agree to the tenets and the theology about Jesus in that group. And that ranges widely all over American Christianity. I mean, you can have very divergent views about who Jesus was and is. And even if you grow up in a denomination and are really in it deeply, there comes a time when you become an adult and you begin to have questions about what you were taught. And the minute you begin to doubt what you were taught, you think you have to leave. And so we have a massive exodus from the church in America because of doubt. And the shame is, it's not necessary. Because it's the wrong kind of doubt. Let's look at today's scripture. Jesus, first of all, this is the very end of the Gospel of Matthew. It's the last verses of the last chapter. Jesus is meeting the disciples, or meets them, on a mountain in Galilee. That's where he started his ministry, north of Jerusalem. He's back there, it tells us, with the 11. Remember, Judas is gone. So it's Jesus and the 11 disciples on the mountain. And he teaches them. And then there's this strange verse that says, I think it's verse 17, they worshipped him, but some of them doubted. What? Think about that for a moment. So, for 3 years, you followed Jesus as your rabbi and teacher 24/7. You followed him because you believed in what he said. You see him executed in a horrible way. And now you see this Jesus as a man brought back from the dead, living, standing on the side of a mountain, and you doubt? That doesn't make any sense. No, really. That doesn't make any sense. And the reason it doesn't make any sense is because this is not a literal story about a literal event. And until the church has the courage to say this, we are going to continue to have people leave. Good people. People that should be a part of the fold. This story is a metaphor. It's a symbolic story, which makes it no less important. In fact, in my personal opinion, I think it makes it more important. And if we come to understand it as the metaphor that it is, we get its deeper meaning. So what was the doubt about? What is the symbolic meaning of this doubt that a disciple, a follower has? Well, it's not a doubt about what doctrines were taught about Jesus. Matthew writes this story in about 90 AD, okay, 60 years after Jesus' crucifixion. By 90 AD, there were all kinds of different groups with different understandings and doctrines about Jesus. There was a group that thought Jesus was completely divine, not human at all. There's another group that thought Jesus was completely human, not divine at all. There was another group that thought to be a follower of Jesus, you had to follow all the Jewish law. There was another group that thought if you were a follower of Jesus, you did not have to obey any laws at all, ever. And that's just a small sampling. There were many more that a scholar could go on and on and on about already by 90 AD. So in 90 AD, the doubt Matthew, Jesus is talking about has nothing to do with doctrines and teachings about Jesus. And if it wasn't true in 90 AD, it's not true in 2020. I mean, today, in the majority of churches, there is kind of a consensus, although it doesn't work for everybody, but there's kind of a consensus about what you have to think about Jesus to be a member of the group. For instance, you know many of them. You have to believe he was born of a virgin. You have to believe that the primary purpose that he came into the world was to save us from eternal hell, right? You have to believe that he never committed a sin. You have to believe that he's somehow, at the same time, all God and all human. And there's others. But in order to be a member of the group, these are the things you must believe. And for those that do, that is okay. There's nothing wrong with that. However, every one of those doctrines about Jesus that I told you are taken from a literal understanding of the stories in the Bible. And that's okay. But it is equally okay to move beyond literalism and into a universal spirituality. It is okay to try to understand the metaphors as taking us deeper into the heart of God. And in fact, some of us has found that the true beauty is found as we travel beyond the doctrines into a universal spirituality. So that takes us back to the question. What does it mean to doubt? And what does it mean to believe? What it means to believe in Jesus is to believe in that which he taught. And what did Jesus teach? He did not teach about himself. He always pointed toward God. And what did he teach about God? He taught that God is love in all circumstances. And so if you want to be a believer, believe that God is love, no matter how heartbreaking, no matter how chaotic, and no matter how painful life becomes. If you have to go through the death of a parent to COVID-19, can you still believe that God is love? If you can, you're a believer. If you have to watch your brother wrongfully killed on the street, can you still believe that God is love? If you can, you're a believer. If you have to watch your business burn to the ground and have to wonder where your next paycheck is going to come from, can you still believe that God is love? If you can, you're a believer. If you go to the doctor and find out that you've been diagnosed with cancer, can you still believe that God is love? If you can, you're a believer. If your marriage completely falls apart because of no fault of your own and you're alone, can you still believe that God is love? If you can, you're a believer. Jesus taught that believing God in all, that God is love in all circumstances will change your life. Can you see now why some of the disciples doubted? When everything is going wrong, when life just seems to be weighing down on you in a way that you can't even breathe, it's hard to believe that God is love. It's hard to believe that in, with, and under everything that exists is a God that loves you and knows you and is ultimately in control. It's hard to believe. And I imagine many people cannot cross that line into belief. And so they doubt. Evangelism is showing the world that no matter how ugly it gets, God is still love and God is in control. And what Jesus taught is if we actually live and believe that, we are on the path to peace, to hope, and to change. Yesterday, such a beautiful day, Joni and I decided, let's go for a walk. So we decided to drive to Frankfurt. And as we're pulling into Frankfurt, we're going to walk on the Old Plain Trail. There's cars parked on the streets everywhere. I go, Joni, something big is going on here. I don't know what's happening. And as we got to this parking lot, we found a space and we saw a huge crowd on the town square. And we got out of the car, and as we got out of the car, we saw a mom and two daughters walking towards us. And Joni asked them, what's going on here? And the mother said, it's a rally for middle school aged kids against racism. And the minute she said that, I looked back at this throng of people and I saw the church. That is the church. It was a group of people, I have no idea what doctrines about Jesus they believed or if they believed any at all. But I knew they believed love was the answer. That's what our church is. It's a group of people that come together to reinforce in the midst of a lot of dark things that happen that God is still love and will always be love. And no matter what kind of hurt we experience, that love never changes. And that is the thing that brings us back to peace. And if you find yourself doubting, if you're one of the ones who right now is doubting it all, do something. Pray for somebody other than yourself today. Do a random act of kindness for someone. Stand up for somebody that needs to be stood up for. Cry with somebody that needs someone to mourn with them. Rejoice with somebody who is rejoicing. Watch the doubt slip away. This faith is not about how we understand doctrines. It's about believing that God's love is constant and in, with, and under all that exists. And holding on to that through all circumstances and finding our peace and our joy through it. May God grant you that peace today. Amen.